Microsoft Office add-ins community call. My name is David Chesnut, and I'm your host for this call. Let's go ahead and get into the agenda for today's call, which is pretty full. Joining us today, Abid is going to be sharing some updates on keyboard shortcuts. And Sohail is going to be talking about some updates to custom contextual tabs. And also joining us are Nancy and Damien Bird, talking about Office scripts. Damien Bird is our guest presenter today, who has a cool demo he's going to share around Office scripts and Power Automate. And then finally, we'll have an update on Outlook event-based activations from Juan. If there's any questions we're unable to get to today, we post a summary of the call in a blog post later, and we put all the questions in there along with the answers, and any that didn't get answered, we'll put the answers there. So let's go ahead and go to our first presentation with Abid.
Yes, so I just took control there. Thank you, David.
Right, thanks.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm very excited today to give you an update on the keyboard shortcuts feature for Excel. So a few things to run through. I'll quickly run through what the feature actually is, as well as what updates we have now that we're ready for our GA announcement today. So keyboard shortcuts this is an Excel-only feature, but you can essentially use keyboard shortcuts to invoke any action that you want inside of your add-in. So these can do things like open and close the task pane. You can fetch data for the current selected cell that you have. You can apply some custom formatting. You can open the dialog, reset settings, whatever you really want to do inside of your add-in. You'll be able to invoke that action with a keyboard shortcut. So quickly breaking it down, there's essentially three parts to this feature. So one part is the actual keyboard shortcut itself. So these are things like Control C, Control F, Control Shift 4, what the actual combination is. And then you have the corresponding action. So whenever a user presses that keyboard shortcut, you want it to invoke an action inside of your add-in. And then, of course, you have the actual JavaScript code that lives inside of your add-in. That's your callback function for whenever that action is executed. So we'll quickly go through the three steps to adding keyboard shortcuts. I do want to say that this is the exact same as it was during our preview phase. So nothing has changed here in terms of your implementation. If you were using keyboard shortcuts in the preview phase, you can continue doing so just as you were there. So the three main steps: number one, you need to add a new node inside of your existing XML manifest. And what this does is essentially links the add-in to your shortcuts definitions. So for example, you're seeing in the top picture, this is just pointing to a file on the local host, and this is a JSON file. And then in the bottom left, you'll see what that JSON file actually looks like. So inside of this JSON file, you have your actions array. This includes all the different actions that you want your shortcuts to invoke. And then you have your shortcuts array, which includes the actual shortcut combination definitions for each of those actions. And then, of course, inside of your application code itself, you have your callback functions that you want to link back to these actions. So I'll link to the documentation that dives into this with a lot more detail. So if you are new to this, you can head over there and then start playing around with it. All right, so in terms of updates, so we are ready to announce GA today, so I'm excited to announce GA. So what's new in GA? In preview phase, we only introduced keyboard shortcuts for Excel Online, but now we are extending that support for Windows and for Mac. So for Windows, if you have customers in the Enterprise Semi-Annual channel, this is available in the current Semi-Annual channel preview, which will be available to customers in July if they're not already in preview. And then for all other audiences, it's available right now. And then for Mac, the minimum version you need is 16.48. And then, of course, for online, all of these functionality this is available as of today. So a few other different updates for GA. We have added support for different locales. So you can change the shortcut definition that you're defining for a certain action depending on the locale of the user. We've also added platform-specific shortcuts capability, so you can also change the shortcuts depending on which platform the user is in. So if the user installs your add-in on Windows, you can use things like Control D, Control F, Control G. But then, for example, if you have a lot of users on Mac as well and you want to have them use Command S, Command F, Command G. You can define those inside of that JSON file directly. We've also added support for shortcuts when the keyboard focus is inside of the task pane. So this was a key piece of feedback that we heard from a lot of developers during the preview phase, is that when, for example, you try to open the task pane and the keyboard focus jumps to the task pane, the shortcuts don't work anymore. So we have extended the support to make sure that even when the user's keyboard focus is inside of the task pane, the registered shortcuts will still continue to work. And then the last thing that I want to spend a bit of time on is we've introduced a new conflict modal. So this allows the user to pick which shortcut to use in the case that there are conflicts between the shortcuts. So let's dive a bit deeper into this and see what that means. So of course, there's many keyboard shortcuts that are already in use by Office, and this is even more prevalent in Excel. I think almost all of the Control-Shift letter combinations are already in use by Excel. So you want to avoid registering keyboard shortcuts that conflict with existing shortcuts. But of course, there might be some cases where this is necessary. So a good example of that is, for example, if you use Control-Shift-4 for currency formatting in Excel, and you have functionality that builds on top of that. So that's essentially you're customizing that currency formatting for your specific users. That's a good example of when you'd want to essentially override the existing native shortcut. Other than that, we really recommend that you stray away from trying to override shortcuts that already exist, but we understand that in some cases it might be necessary. So in those cases, what happens is that when you attempt to override an existing shortcut, or when two or more add-ins have registered the same shortcut for a user, the first time the user goes to use that shortcut, they will be presented with this conflict modal, and they can choose which action they want to invoke with their shortcut combination. So these preferences are saved per user, per platform. And of course, the user can go back and change their mind. So to do that, they simply just have to look up the reset Office add-in shortcut preferences command. And you can find this in the tell me search box for all the platforms. And when you do this, it essentially just gets rid of all your preferences, and you can go back. And next time you use that shortcut again, you'll see this conflict modal again. So this is a last. We want to avoid the scenario as much as possible, but if you do have scenarios where you need to override shortcuts, this will be the experience that your users face. All right, so that's mostly the updates that I have for keyboard shortcuts. So what's next? We are working on some customization APIs. So this will essentially allow you to customize those shortcuts that you registered for your users after the add-in is running for the user. So if you have some kind of information for the user, let's say you have some kind of role-based user model, so you have admins or other users that use different shortcuts, you can customize those shortcuts during runtime after the user has already started the add-in. So this is something we're working on right now. I'll let you know when we have some updates around it, but for now, please do play around with the keyboard shortcuts functionality. We have PNP here that David will present in a little bit, and then we also have the documentation. So feel free to jump into the documentation and start playing around with it there. So David, please take it away. That's all for me.
Yeah, thanks. It's really cool to see, like, folks have asked questions about these features in the past, and now to see that show up as shipping features. So I love seeing the conversation on these calls, helping drive development efforts. So we know, like, we're building the right things for all the developers out there. Okay, so I've got Excel open here on Windows, and I've opened up the keyboard shortcuts PNP sample. And basically what this does is it has some shortcuts defined here, which I love because I'm a power user. I like using the keyboard. So if I hit Control-Alt-3, you can see that that's just cycling through colors in the current cell that's selected. I can do Control-2, which will hide the task pane, Control-1, which shows it again. And then if you want to see how the conflict resolution works, there's a Control-R shortcut, and that pops up this dialog that Abid was talking about, where it says, oh, well, there's two actions here. Did you want to use Excel's fill right, or did you want to use the feature that's coming from this PNP sample? So you can pick which one you want it to do and hit OK, and then that's what it's going to use from now on. So That one's a pretty simple demo. So go check it out. You can see how the JSON's structured in the source code and how it handles the actions being sent to the JavaScript and so on.
Okay, clearly the question I have was the shortcuts. Is it only available for the task pane, or the shortcuts are they available for the ribbon? Let's say in the ribbon I have two different ribbon items. Can I use a shortcut to launch one of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you do need shared runtime to be able to use those shortcuts. So if you are using shared runtime, you can hook up that same code that's being executed when you click on the ribbon button with an action that's executed when you click on the shortcut. So you can simulate that clicking on the shortcut executes. It's the same thing as the user actually clicking on the ribbon button as well.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Sohail, you're up next.
Okay. Thanks, David. Hey, everyone. So I'm Sohail Zafar. I'm also a PM in the Office platform team, and I'll be providing an update on custom contextual tabs functionality. So for those of you who are not aware of what custom contextual tabs are, it's a capability we have shipped in preview already, and hopefully some of you may have gotten a chance to play with it. So what the capability allows that before custom contextual tabs, our platform allowed add-in developers to define a custom tab where you can put your ribbon buttons, and when a user installs your add-in, they would see that custom tab with all the ribbon buttons that you had placed on that tab. The consistent feedback we heard from a lot of partners was that, hey, we have a lot of functionality and we want to show some of those buttons in the context of the task that the user is working on. But because of the platform limitation that you have, we have to cram all those 23, 20, 30 buttons onto a single tab. And it's just not the best user experience. So leveraging the Office model of contextual tabs, which allows you to actually show a set of contextual commands when a user is working on a task. A good example of an Office contextual tab is, say you're in an Excel file and you click on a table and the table format tab shows up in the ribbon. Or you're in a PowerPoint slide deck and you click on a picture and the picture format contextual tab shows up, which has its own set of commands. So with this capability, now I'm happy to say that like customers, add-in developers can now show custom contextual tabs that are relevant to your add-in, and you can show a set of commands on that custom tab. So we are declaring GA on Windows and web. We are working very hard to actually get it out on Mac as soon as possible as well. And then currently this capability is supported in Excel for the time being, but our plan is to bring that to Word and PowerPoint eventually as well. And then I have written the build number as well, which you can reference. And that build is available in the current channel, the monthly enterprise channel, and the semi-annual enterprise channel. Moving on, the end user experience is that similar to Office contextual tabs, custom contextual tabs always appear at the end of the ribbon, like on the right-hand side of the ribbon after built-in contextual tabs. So say you're in an Excel, your user is in an Excel file, they click on a table, the table format contextual tab shows up, and then on the same event, you also have coded that my Contoso contextual tab also shows up. So the Contoso contextual tab is going to show up after that. the tabs appear in the order defined in the add-in. If more than one add-in has a contextual tab, then they appear in the order in which the add-in were launched. And unlike custom tabs, they're not added permanently to the Office Applications ribbon. They're present only in the Office document on which your add-in is running. So the user experience is going to be that anytime your user opens the document, the add-ins base tab will be there, but custom contextual tabs will only show up when the user takes an event based on which your add-in decides to show the tab. In terms of developer experience, you just need to have a shared runtime, because that's actually one of the things that the tabs require the runtime to be a shared one. Then you register then you define the tabs and the group in a JSON blob. You register the contextual tabs with Office, and then specify when the tabs will be available. And the one biggest difference there to keep in mind is that you will notice that today you define the custom tab in the manifest, and that has its pros and cons. The benefit is that when a user launches the document, the tab is still there. But our add-in developers have to update the manifest anytime there is a change in the tab and have to go through the validation process. In this particular functionality's case, we thought of that, and the dev experience is that actually custom contextual tabs are added at the runtime. So as you can see, we have provided a couple of APIs. The first API allows you to define and add the custom contextual tabs when your add-in launches. And then the second API allows you to show and hide the contextual tab based on the event or the action that a user takes. That's basically where they are. Like as I said, to summarize, the capability is currently available on Excel only and on Windows, and we are declaring GA on Windows and the web platform. Mac is in progress, and we are expecting to get that out pretty soon as well. And then eventually we will provide parity to this feature on PowerPoint and Word as well. In terms of next steps, please go to our documentation website. All the documentation related to the functionality is there. If you need support, please reach out to us on GitHub or Stack Overflow, and one of us will respond to your questions there. And happy to reply to any questions. You can put them in the chat window as well, and I will reply back to you during the call or after the call when we are done presenting. That's all I have. I'm going to stop presenting now.
All right, thanks, Sohail. Just do a quick demo of the contextual tabs. All right, so this is our PNP sample that shows how the contextual tabs work. And so the basic scenario is you might want to import some data to work with from some data source. So like I can pick which one I want to see and go ahead and import that. And it creates this table for me with that data. And when I'm in the table, you can see this. Let's see if I can get this out of the way. There we go. There's this table data contextual tab, which is only open when I'm in the table. If I move outside of it, you'll see it goes away. If I'm back inside the table, it reappears. And then I don't need to have this task pane open. I can work with menu items. You can see I have a drop-down menu here. I can show the task pane by clicking on the Show Task Pane button. It's responsive. If I make changes in the table, then it sees I made a change, and then I can either refresh the data from the source to overwrite my changes here, or I can submit these back to that data source. And this is just working with a mock data source. There isn't an actual SQL database behind it, because it's just showing how the contextual tab works. So that's something you could definitely try out if you want to see how it works. Go check it out on GitHub. You should have the link for that in the slide deck. And you can see how the code works to create that tab and how to detect events from the table to display this or not display your tab, and so on. Nancy, you'll be up next.
Thank you, David. Yeah, so I'm really excited to be here with Damien today talking about Office scripts with Power Automate. Damien has a really cool demo of how you can use Power Automate and Office scripts together to populate an Excel template, but that's all I'll say because I think he's done a really great job with it, and I don't want to spoil all the surprises. Just as a quick recap before I go on to the next slide, Office scripts is an automation platform on Excel and the web, and so if you have a E3 license or above of Office 365, then you're able to access this tab and automate your workflow using our action recorder and code editor. The code editor uses Office.js. You can learn more at our new portal page. So this is something that was put together by our team. I'm really excited to share this out. We can definitely send this out for anyone that is interested. This is a new place where you can view all the things about Office scripts and also be updated on the latest updates. Without further ado, I'm going to let Damien take control here. So Damien, go ahead.
Perfect. Thanks, Nancy, for the wee intro. If I just jump into my opening slide. So today, I just want to say, first of all, thanks very much, David and Nancy, for inviting me along, and thanks for the opportunity to present. My name is Damien Bird, as you've heard already. I'm available on all the social media platforms as DamoBird365. I'm very much a community developer. I'm active on the Power Platform community site, and in March was the top non-super user. So feel free to reach out and connect. I've worked in IT the past 20 years, thoroughly enjoy exploring business process automation. And the solution I'm about to demonstrate primarily uses Power Automate, but also relies on Excel scripts. As you'll see, the two tie up nicely together. So the purpose of my use case is really to demonstrate how you can populate Excel files using both Power Automate and Excel scripts without the need for tables in Excel, which is the current limitation of the cloud flow actions at the moment. So I'm about to demonstrate invoicing, but equally you could use it for issue tracking or time cards or money management. So I've seen lots of good examples of Excel scripts to perform functions that are not native to Power Automate. But what I'll do now is I'll jump onto my demonstration. And one of the key things for you to maybe do on your own PCs right now is you'll see a URL on that slide I've got to Excel demo. If you want to jump onto that page, if everything goes to plan, I've got an extra bonus at the end. So here I am on the page that I've asked you to look at, and there's a series of links here, but we'll move on to that later on. So I've got here a SharePoint site, and to make things more visual, I've got a couple of lists. And so I've stored the data for the customers into a list. Now, in a real life scenario, you might be using a SQL database or the Dataverse to store this data. But I think for this demo, it just makes it easier to visualize. So we've got a customer reference, which is unique to these individual companies. And then we've got data that's going to get pulled across onto the invoice template that I've got. I've then got a second list. Again, you'll notice that the customer reference is key here. We've got a one-to-many relationship. So this would be, in effect, the monthly transactions that have been carried out by the business that we're looking to invoice these individual companies. And then we've got a series of columns here relating to the quantity, like an item number, for instance, a reference, a description. So we're obviously billing here for work relating to building Power Automate, the unit price, and then a discount for each of these lines. And you'll see that the discount varies depending on the customer reference and the different description and job that we've been completing. And so what I plan to do is I'm going to pull this information across and populate this Excel invoice. So jumping onto the Excel invoice, you'll see here I've picked up a template actually from Microsoft, and I've put a nice little header at the top there. But what we're looking to do is, using those fields that were on that list, we're going to populate the unique fields here for the company. There's going to be an invoice number, an invoice date, various other cells, and then the sort of more interesting bit are these individual lines that relate to the data that is in those tables. And like I say, that the data that's in those lists, I've used it as a visual. In a real life scenario, you're going to have a front end system somewhere capturing this transactional information, but it's the flow that does the clever work with Excel scripts. I'll jump onto the automate tab as well, and just open up the script before I jump onto my flow. So I was lucky enough to have the Excel team look at my script. I'm not a JavaScript programmer or TypeScript programmer, but I was able to build this solution entirely by myself, just by reading the content that's online and relying on some of the material that Microsoft have already put together on the developer site. So jumping into the script, you can see here I've defined a series of variables that are used in the call to the script in the cloud flow. So you'll see these things later on, things like the invoice number, the date, the payment method, and check number. There are also references to the customer, which makes up the cells here. And there's also the sales array, which makes up all the individual lines in the invoice. And so the Excel script, you can see, updates these individual cells, so G2, G3, based on the variable that's passed in the header of this function or via the cloud flow call. We then got a similar example here where we've defined a range. So we've got C2 to C6, which is this particular range here of the customer, and we're applying things like the name, the customer name, and such like. And then a slightly different example, we've got a loop here. It starts at row 12, which is where the first line of our invoice begins. And then we're looping through the array and again applying those values into the row in the Excel sheet. At the bottom, this was a bit that I hadn't really grasped, and I'm grateful to the Excel team for having a look. The keen programmers will know exactly what they're doing, but defining interfaces here. So this is how the arrays are defined and how Power Automate knows what fields need passed onto this script. So I'm going to close this file down now and jump into my flow. And I'll go into edit that flow. And so at the moment, I've got it set up as a manual flow. And in a real life scenario, again, you might have a recurrence trigger so that it's running at the end of every month or every week, depending on how often you want to build. And then the first action I do here is to get the invoice template. So on my demo SharePoint site, I have a template file, and I grab a copy of that because I ultimately don't want to overwrite it. And then I've got a couple more actions to get the two lists that we saw earlier, the customer accounts list and the items, the work complete list. And again, in a real life scenario, you might have an OData filter in place there to just retrieve the data that's relevant for the month that it's running, for instance, or the week that it's running. At the moment, it's running for everything. And then I jump into an apply to each. So this apply to each is running off the value that's retrieved from the customers. And so that will obviously traverse through every single customer that's in that initial list. So in this scenario, there were 4 customers. It will run through those 4 as a loop. And the first thing that I do is to create a copy of that file. So using the company name, and just to create a unique file name, I'm using the format date time expression to pick up the month and the year and append that to the file name. And then I pick up the file content from the original invoice that I've picked up at the top here. And that's just so I've created an empty copy of the original invoice. Then on the array that we've created, or the array that we've received from the work complete at the top there, we're then doing a filter based on the customer reference. So I mentioned that the customer reference was integral to both the customer account and the work done. We've got a one-to-many relationship there, and because we're in a loop, we're able to pick up that customer reference that's relevant to this particular loop or this particular customer, and we retrieve all of the work items that are equal to that customer reference. For the purpose of my testing, I had another compose action here just purely to check the length of the array that was returned from that filter, just to make sure that when I was expecting 8, the length was 8. And finally, in order to just get the data into the right format, into the right array format, I'm using this select action here, and then sort of mapping out all of the values or the keys that we saw in the Excel script and passing on all these values here. So that's built up the array that's getting passed to the script. And so running the script itself, you pick the name of the script here, sorry, that you can see called script. So I've got an Excel script version 2. And we use the file ID, which is based off of the create file invoice. And then again, some more dynamic content like the invoice number I've made up using the customer reference and today's date and time. Some of the values I've just put in plain text, but ultimately in a real life scenario, you might want to use some dynamic content. And then one of the sort of interesting features here is that I'm passing data to the script as an array for the sales, but for the customer, it's actually split up into individual fields, and that's based on the end of the script where you define, or in fact, it's not the end, but you saw at the end of the script where the fields were defined. At the top, there was the definition for an array versus a non-array for the customer, and this is where it's getting a bit technical for me, so the programmers will know what I mean. But that's sort of covered the basics of the cloud flow. At the bottom here, I've got a part 2 optional bit, which is the clever bit. I'm not going to go into detail on this one. If it runs, it's an added bonus, but the aim is here using some of the out of the box or the connectors that are included as part of Office 365. I am going to try and turn the Excel file into a PDF as well, so that you have a nicely finished invoice. So I'm going to go ahead with testing it now, and we'll go ahead here and hit the run flow. So the actual process at the moment takes about 60 seconds to go through all of those records and feed the information to Excel via the script for each of those 4 files. Now there's also that other extra bit as well, which will add to the overhead. But if I jump back to my SharePoint site and into my documents folder, this is where I store the template invoice, but I've also got an invoices folder here. And this is where my invoices are being created as we speak, as the cloud flow is running. So I'm pleased to say that we've at least got 2 out of the 4 so far. I'm just going to wait until the process is completed because I don't want to disturb the files. I'd really like this whole thing to run without a hitch. So I think we're only a few seconds away from a finish now. Oh, there we go. So your flow has run successfully. Perfect. So back onto my SharePoint site. If I open up Marketing for You, for instance, and look at the invoice here, we can see we've got Tracy Manning, who works for Marketing for You. And here are the various lines of the invoice that relates to the work that we're billing for that month. And one of the other sort of curious things, it's pretty basic, but it's a great feature to have because this is an Excel file. You've obviously got all the formulas, so it's calculated things like the line totals. It's worked out the discounts that we've passed on dynamically through the cloud flow. It's worked out the subtotal, and one of the variables in the cloud flow, if you were watching, was the VAT rate, so 20%, and all that's worked out nice and neat. So the added bonus, if this has worked, if I jump back onto the SharePoint site here, you'll see where I had my links to the various social media platforms. If I go ahead and just refresh that page, we'll see now we've got 4 links to the various invoices. So if I click on Marketing for You, it'll actually open up the invoice in PDF format. So that was the second part of the demonstration, which I'm pleased to say it has worked. And that is basically the end of the demonstration. I hope everyone enjoyed that and followed it. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Damien. That is really awesome. It's taking it all the way to the PDF. I can see everybody's really appreciating it there. Thank you, Damien, and that was a fantastic demo.
Thank you.
So Juan, I'll let you take over with Outlook.
Thank you very much. Very nice demo. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, hello, how are you? This is Juan Balmori here. I got you an update from the Outlook addins team. We're going to talk a little bit about event-based activation, new events in preview. So new stuff you guys can play with today if you want to, basically. So first of all, this is something that my team it's been working for the last many months about event-based activation. And this is a new type of extension point that you can add to your Outlook add-ins that will enable you to seamlessly integrate your business or solution into the Outlook experience. And the reason why we say that is because, as you know, today, with add-ins in Outlook, if you want to perform a task, like for instance, what I'm showing here, this is just a simple example of adding one recipient to a composed email. You have to go and click on the task pane and select an action, either a UI-less action or showing a task pane to do this operation, right? But then you were asking us, how can we, do this without the user having to open a task pane or call a UI-less action? And the answer to that question is event-based add-ins. So the same scenario here, it's going to be shown with this animation. And as you can see, just by the user clicking on new email, you will get the recipient added. And that's because we are exposing this event that you guys can add the handlers for that event and then just do your logic. You do whatever you want to perform here. Now, again, this has been for many months. We have been talking with you guys around this. In fact, the onCompose event, as well as all the signature APIs, are in preview going on production right now. So this is going to be soon. Many of you are using this. What I want to talk about today is in preview, starting with the build that I'm showing right here, which is basically the build that if you go to the preview to the beta channel and you install it today, this is at least you're going to get this build number. So starting here, you're going to be able to have additional events that you can actually play with today. So the call to action is install the preview, and then we are adding the on recipients change. So every time a user adds or removes recipients in the 2CC or BCC lines, you will get that event. You're also going to get one event when attachments are changed, and then when you change the time of an appointment or a recurrence of an appointment. Okay, so these 4 new events are in preview right now. Please help us. Try them, send us feedback if you like it or if it's not working as you expect. Now, I'm going to show you a quick demo on how can you use these new events. So let me just open Outlook here. What you're seeing here, this demo is very simple. It's just going to be an event that it's going to be kind of interacting. Sorry, I have a secondary screen here. I am creating a new email, and you see the idea here is that if I select an internal recipient, and in this case, internal means on my dev tenant, I'm going to have like a very simple signature, added to my email. However, if I add external recipients, like for example, someone in hotmail.com, I want to add, for those external guys, I want to add something kind of more informative of what I'm doing. And in this case, this URL is real. So if you go to AKAMS/learn event-based add-ins, you will be able to find all the details of what I'm saying on this call, what are the events supported, and how can you try them today if you want to, okay? So this is a very, very simple demo, but as you can see, we are talking about the seamlessly experience, no? As I am adding recipients to an email, your add-ins should just work, and it works really efficiently. Now let's see how can I add all this new good stuff into my existing projects. Here, what I'm showing you is a project that was created using our Joe Office tools. So you just create an Outlook add-in project. And then you open the manifest here, and you will see that a couple of things that you need to add to the manifest are basically the runtimes element. So every time you add a runtimes element means you're telling Outlook, hey, this is my add-in, and it's going to be using some of the new kind of event-based activations. You need to specify 2 URLs because we have different engines that are running the code depending on the platform. If you are in Outlook for the web or OWA, we are actually instantiating the full browser. So this URL can be an HTML page, including the JavaScript for the event handlers. However, if you're in Windows, you just need to specify a JavaScript file, because what we tried to do in Windows was to, just instantiate a very lightweight JavaScript engine to run your code. You are not loading the full browser, and this will enable you to experience, very nice performance and support, give a more rapid response to your users. So that's the first thing. You need to add a runtimes element. And then after that, you're also going to get on the extension, a new extension point, which is called launch event. And here in my demo, you can see that I am adding basically events for everything, to message compose or appointment organizer when you're composing messages or appointments. And here are all the other events that we support today. So you just need to add those entries here, and then you need to specify the method that should be on the files that you specified earlier that we're going to call when those events happen. And then as you can see here on my manifest, they're super simple. The web view runtime URL points to commands.html in my project. And the one for Windows is the JavaScript runtime URL, which points to command.js. And if I go to command.js, super straightforward. This is the JavaScript file that has all the event handlers. So I have a method for each of the events. And as you can see here, the onRecipients change, which is the one that I was showing you in the demo, it's performing a basic logic, to find out if the email is external or not. And if it is external, it inserts the internal signature, and if it's external, the external one, right? So let's take a look at that method very quickly. So we just go to the definition, and this is very straightforward. This is a base64 encoded image with the Microsoft logo in this case. And then I'm checking here, I'm adding a disclaimer, an after-hours disclaimer. So basically this checks the date and time of the email, and if it's too late, I will just add a message that ignore this message if after hours. And finally, I am just assembling an HTML that I am actually sending as the signature with the new set signature API, right? So very straightforward. Please try it today. One other thing that you need to do, don't forget to do the association of the methods and the handlers. You need to call office.actions.associate. And if you do all these things, you have an event-based add-in up and running. Super simple. Now, okay, new events in preview. So one thing that I forgot to mention here that is quite important, one of the methods that we are also adding to the preview is the method it's a new property bag that we are exposing for these types of add-ins. And let me tell you the scenario for that. As you can see here, I'm calling it. We have a new object that we call session data object. And what happens and could happen when you're creating these add-ins is this. Once the event is launched and you handle the event and all that, the runtime that is instantiated will not be forever there running in the background. So it's basically we are eliminating that process. We're killing it after some time, right? I think that right now the timeout is 5 minutes, which means that the runtime is, while the events are triggering, the runtime is going to be receiving them and kind of running the logic of your events. After 5 minutes, the JavaScript engine is gone. But for example, it could happen that people are composing a message and then they are typing and taking 10 minutes to type the message. At the end of that, you add more recipients, or you change the subject, or you change the date of an appointment, for example, not the subject, the date, and then a new event is going to get launched. So what happens is that you could have many instances running on the same composition. And the way that you store state across all those sessions is through this property bag, that it's in memory, only available during the lifetime of the composition. That's why we call it session data. And basically, it's a dictionary that you can store name value pairs, a string or JSON objects, to keep state across the instantiations of the JavaScript engine. Hopefully that was clear. Everything is properly documented in case that was too fast. Finally, with this feature, guys, obviously one of the scenarios that we are favoring on our first release is the signature scenarios. We have been showing a lot of excitement about it, but the possibilities are really endless. Go to the link to learn more about it. But basically, now we are enabling the scenario where you can add information for external or internal recipients using these events. Another scenario that's going to be very popular is when people add attachments. Typical scenario here is if someone adds a very large attachment to an email, probably you can suggest something like, hey, why don't you, rather than inserting this attachment, you add a link to that file, no? You can upload it to OneDrive or to anywhere you want instead of a large attachment. You can enable scenarios where you suggest better times for meetings because the attendees given the attendees and the times that you're sending your meeting, maybe in different time zones, it's not appropriate for folks in your communications. So this is the right time where you want to show that, right? When you're changing the time, when you're changing recipients of an email. And finally, there are other scenarios that I have seen you guys doing, like, for example, adding catering to an appointment. But if you change the appointment time and date and time, you want to make sure that you update those services so that, the meals arrive at the right time. Okay? So really, with this slide, I am trying to share with you all the possibilities you have, to implement solutions using these events. And of course, we are focusing right now more in the composition of an email, but we are kind of right now, we're always, but especially now, we're listening to your feedback. If you think that you need more events, to enable great experiences within Outlook, please share it with the team. We are more than happy to hear about it. And finally, I want to leave this slide here so that you can see more information about event-based add-ins. And I want to specifically mention that David, who is our host in those calls, David Chesnut, created a PNP. I'm not sure if he's going to share with you in the future, but on this link, you can go and get the pattern and practice about the compose events and the use of the signature APIs. All right, and I think that's it from my side, David. I think we are just in time to close the call, but if anyone has a question, please feel free to ask.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. It's always great seeing the event-based activation updates around Outlook and how that's been an evolving story. Yeah, that PNP, I did a demo of that on the last call. So if folks want to see it, it should be out on YouTube, or you can find the link to it in the blog post.
There you go.
Yeah, definitely check it out. And we're working on some new ones too that hopefully will be coming out soon. Questions?
Yeah, sorry. Hey, I'm not sure if my chat was working. I've got a question for you, Juan. So,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I was wondering, we've seen a couple of the for example, on send function that was previously released by you guys. That one, if used in the manifest file, is not basically our add-in can't be in the app source. I was wondering, first of all, why that might be, and then if that's changing, and then is that similar to these ones that you just showed us here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sakit. Thanks for asking that. So we have an event, and what Sakit is asking is that we have item send event that it works in a very similar fashion as what I was showing here. We already released this, I think in November last year or 2 years ago, we released the 1.8 requirement set that includes the item send event. One of the drawbacks or one of the cons of that approach or that feature was that it's really, we call it actually internally in the team, we call it hard block on send because it could be kind of an aggressive block in the sense that if your add-in is not available for whatever reason, people cannot send emails in Outlook. No? So basically we basically are canceling one of the most important tasks in Outlook, which is sending emails. And believe it or not, in some customers, that is by design. No? If you, for example, if you don't add some classification to an email, you shouldn't be sending it. No? So we have add-ins that are that critical. That was one of the reasons why we are not allowing add-ins that are using that event to be on the store, because it could seriously impact the experience of Outlook, and we are only allowing it through direct manifest deployment. The good news that I have for everybody, Sankit, is that we are adding a new items, a new flavor of the item send event that we call it internally soft block on send. And that is going to be in preview very soon. Probably in the next, one of the next community calls, I will be here to share it with you. But the team is currently working on it, and the idea is that we will never block people from sending emails. So you're going to be able to have some friendly kind of warnings, or you're going to be able to block sending the email. But if the add-in is not available, then it's just going to go. The email is just going to go. So the good news is that that is coming, and you will see it quite soon in preview. Thank you for the question. Yeah.
So I'm going to continue on, Juan, with our community spotlight. I just want to say thank you to Maarten van Stam, again, for helping us with PNP contributions. Also, thank you to Leslie Black, who was our guest presenter on the last call. We always appreciate it when folks are contributing, and demoing on a call is a big contribution for our community. And Damien Bird as well today. Thank you. If you want to help do contributions on community efforts, we have our documentation at Office.js Docs PR, where you can make change to the docs if you spot anything needs to be fixed or want to contribute something new. And all of our samples at PNP-Office add-ins as well. Definitely help us out if you can. And then just covering some Q&A real quick. These are some questions that came in on the form, which I'll share the link to that at the end of this in case anyone wasn't able to get to a question today, since we had some problems with the chat. Someone asked, would it be possible to see a demonstration of debugging Outlook add-ins in the Outlook application on mobile devices? So I reached out to the team, and we're looking to set something up on that, perhaps on a future community call. So thanks for asking and requesting that. The next question is, when Outlook REST API is decommissioned in November 2022, what API should add-ins deployed to customer-hosted Exchange servers in 2016, 2019 use for mobile support? So I checked with the team on that, and we're actively working through the details on that. So nothing to share today, but hopefully we'll have...
add a little bit to that question, David?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that is, so this is, we are preparing all the guidance for you guys to do this scenario, specifically for on-prem. Remember that the REST APIs and the Graph APIs are available in on-prem only on hybrid environments. So if you are in that case, we are looking at to see what's the right guidance for you. But remember that in general, what we are trying to do with this move is that you guys move to the Microsoft Graph. And we know that in Outlook add-ins that is a bit challenging, because if you're targeting very old clients, and I'm saying 2013, 2016 perpetual licenses, you don't have many options but to call AWS or Exchange Web Services, no? And that's kind of the minimal common denominator from ever since we shipped the platform to today. So AWS is kind of your safe, your lifesaver here. But what we recommend, the guidance that is going to come out of this is, try to use the graph first. If the graph doesn't work, the previous guidance was use REST, but the REST may not be available. So then fall back to AWS. So it's going to be along those lines, David. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Juan. And the next question, is there any movement on supporting reading values such as app domains and custom properties from the add-in manifest at runtime through Office.js? So right now, there's no updates there. I saw that was a user voice request, and now we're using the Microsoft Ideas page. So, at the moment, there's other things that are prioritized that we're working on, because there's lots to work on. But if you could put that on the Ideas page, and if it's not there, I'll go add it as well, just so we can track it. What is the roadmap for Office.js for PowerPoint, and when will it achieve feature parity? So obviously the PowerPoint API is a huge space, and our strategy right now is that we're working to prioritize and build out the most important scenarios that you want for the APIs. So I would say, please let us know what scenarios you want to see enabled. And again, you can just go to the Ideas page, use the Office add-ins development label, and give us feedback on that. So that's really just a strategic approach that we're using to build those out. If you're new to Office add-ins, here's some links you can use to get started with things. A link to the documentation, which has 5-minute quick starts. There's a list of those on the right if you want to get started with Excel, Outlook, and so on. And if you're looking to do Office script stuff, what Damien was showing, check out the AKA MS link there for Office script docs. And some developer resources that you can check out. We have the Microsoft 365 developer program, which gives you a free tenant for building and testing your add-ins. It's very useful. You can also use Script Lab if you want, which is an add-in that lets you run small scripts just to try out features and things. And then there's the Office add-ins documentation. If you want to engage with us, you can ask questions on the Microsoft Q&A channel. There's a link to that there. There's also stackoverflow.com and a list of the different tags you can use there for questions. If you find anything that looks like a product bug, let us know in the Office.js repo on GitHub. And if you have any feature requests and ideas, you can go to our ideas page, and there's a link to that there. This isn't the only developer community call that there is. If you want to check out, there's a link here to all of our calls that you can get invites to for SharePoint and Power Apps, Microsoft Graph, and more. And finally, just want to say thank you to everybody for attending. The recording will be available soon after on our Microsoft 365 Developer YouTube channel. You can follow us on Twitter, and the next call will be June 9th at 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. There is a link at the bottom there. It says submit your questions. If you go to that forum, I just want to say, because we had problems with the chat today, so if you want to ask any questions, go out to that Office add-ins forum, and we'll put them in the blog, the Q&A section of the blog, or we'll address them on the next call based on the timing of when the questions come in. So thanks everybody for attending, and hope you found this useful, and we will see you on the next call.